Hi, I'm Melissa, and this is the Book Break. And today we're going to be talking to a new author named Rebecca Brooke, who has a heartwarming memoir that I just want you all to hear about. So let's just bring her in. Hello.
Hi, Melissa. Thanks for having
Hi.
me.
Yeah, you bet. So, Rebecca, your book is called, let's just bring up the image of it first, because I want everyone to see My Life in Gray. Tell us a little bit more about your book, and then we're just going to go into it more.
Okay. This book is my true life story. I became a very sudden and unexpected widow at age 39. And I was a mom to a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. And during that time, it's entitled My Life in Gray because everything literally in my life was gray. So it's a story about how my journey with, especially with being such a young widow, some things that I wish I would have known, or maybe that it's almost like a guidebook for people who might find themselves in that situation of sudden loss.
Yeah, yeah. And so for those that haven't been widowed, do you think this would resonate with them as well?
I do. I do because everyone will end up losing someone at some point in their lives. Believe this is a story that gives people hope, and it shows a strength that maybe we don't realize we have until we're put into that position. I know myself, I never wanted to be a single mom of 2 children, let alone a widowed mom of 2 boys. But we get through adversity, and even when things seem hopeless, I think this book is good for anyone because it's a good story. I mean, not just because
Yeah.
it's mine,
Yeah,
but it's a good
yeah.
story.
Yeah, I agree. And when I was reading your book, the story of how your husband Darwin and you came together, it was really cute. It was like reading a Hallmark movie or something. So tell us about how you and Darwin came together.
It's funny because when Darwin was alive, that was literally our favorite story to tell.
Yeah.
So we went to the same middle school and high school together, and it was in small town USA. Met one another, liked one another, but never said anything at all to one another until about a week before graduation and him joining the Marine Corps. So we had a fleeting summer romance. And then I told him I was going to college and couldn't be with someone who was going to be 5 states away in South Carolina. So I ended things, always felt guilty, but I went on with my life and he went on with his. And 15 years after we graduated, this wonderful thing called Facebook happened. And it was the beginning of finding out who you graduated with and where they are in their life now. And I found him on there, and I had felt so guilty over the way that I had ended things. Even 15 years later, I felt guilty about it. And I reached out to him, and he told me to call him, and that was the end. Our entire life started 15 years
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. And you have two boys.
I do.
And so yeah, there we go. I wanted to show that picture. And that would have been, is this like shortly before he passed away?
That was Thanksgiving of 2015. So about almost a year to the date, actually, before he passed away. So the boys were very
Yeah.
small there. But
Yeah.
they were 4 and 8. My oldest was 10 days before his 9th birthday when Darwin passed away.
Yeah. And something else that resonated with me in your book was talking about how sometimes when a loved one passes away, others don't know what to say, and so sometimes they don't say anything, like they're afraid to mention the person. But you talk about how your boys love to hear stories
Mhm.
about their dad and to talk about family memories. Tell us a little bit more about that.
It is, I think it is a societal issue that people are afraid to bring up the names. Maybe they are afraid they're going to remind the person who had the loss, except it's a constant reminder. So it's not a reminder, but we love to hear stories. It took a long time before anyone could mention Darwin's name without one of us, the three of us, getting very I don't want to say upset, but it is like it breaks your heart all over again when you
Mhm.
realize, your loved one isn't here. But the stories are awesome because it reminds me that people still remember him. And it reminds the boys that people had great stories about their dad. And I think that's very, very important for the healing process for everybody.
Yeah. What did you find with your process? I mean, like you also
Mhm.
mentioned this in the book. When we lose someone close to us, it's it's a life journey. We're not ever just over it, but there are certain steps that we go through as we
Mhm.
come from that gray place to living life in color again. What were some things that you found helpful?
A lot of things that I felt helpful were I never stopped. So, in a way, me having young children was very, very hard because I had to keep going for them. I couldn't just lay in bed and be depressed like I kind of wanted to because I
Mhm.
had a 4-year-old who couldn't make his own food. My 8-year-old still needed his mom. So I couldn't stop. And I think that actually was very helpful to the grief process. It gave me reason to get up. It gave me reasons to still continue to, make food for the boys and food for myself. And I couldn't step away from society like I think happens sometimes. I also had a great network of people who checked on me constantly. Um, they would call me, text me, sometimes stop over, which I mentioned in the book. And it was it was a time when even though I didn't think I wanted people around me, they still came around me. So the not stopping was, I think, key.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something else that I got as I was reading this book is we are going through these difficult things together. Like you just mentioned, we're not on our own. And sometimes we
Right.
feel alone in our grief, but we don't have to be alone. And sometimes it's also okay. Sometimes it's okay to let yourself be alone. That's a part of the process.
I agree. And sometimes people are afraid to let the grieving person be alone, which in some cases might not be a good thing, but there were times when I had to send my kids to their grandparents because I just needed some time for myself.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I
And
also didn't, I'm sorry, I just
no,
didn't want them
go
to
ahead.
see me cry all the time.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
I did have to be strong for them because they
Yeah,
worried about me.
yeah. And what would you like people to get the most from your books?
I really would like people to take that. I have a list of things in the back of the book, and I think there's some really good suggestions to even open up discussion about death or to change some of the things that we as a society still do. Things like I had an overabundance of food. I know it seems that's what we want to do is we want to feed people, but it became another job for me figuring out what to do with all this food. So it was just too much I had already had on my plate. And it was some little things. I just think as a society, we need to talk about death more. That way, maybe it's not so taboo. Everybody dies. I mean, we're all going to be affected by death. And I think conversations need to be opened. So I'm really hoping that this book does open conversations. Luckily, my husband and I had talked about things. We had talked about final wishes. We had talked about life insurance. And I just feel those topics need to be talked about. It's
Yeah,
very important.
definitely. I agree with you completely.
Mhm.
So, where can our viewers go and maybe connect with you?
I have a Facebook group. It's Join My Life in Gray. That's the Facebook group. I am also on Instagram at The Real Rebecca Brooke.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And thank you to our viewers. We'll see you next time.